there are still over 10 teams that have a shot to get to the playoffs. Here we go. What's going on, everybody? It's me again, Golden Blue Dude. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. I do college football videos every single day. So, whether you want to agree with me or talk trash about me or to me, either way, you're gonna like this channel. So just hit the subscribe button. The easiest scenario to think of is Clemson, Alabama, and Ohio State all go undefeated and they're in the playoffs. Then you have that fourth spot. That's where things get nuts. But now that Clemson's Trevor Lawrence won't be able to play against Notre Dame, even that's not as solidified as it was. Now Notre Dame could beat Clemson, get Lawrence back, and then beat Notre Dame in the ACC championship game. Now I want to look at the other teams for that fourth spot and look at their resume that they are building. The first undefeated team that I'm going to talk about, they're only 1-0, but they're still undefeated. Number 21, Boise State. So far, they just have a win over Air Force, 49-30. If Boise State were to go undefeated, they would have one really good win, and that would be the next game against number 9, BYU. Other than that, Colorado State, Hawaii, San Jose, UNLV, Wyoming. And if they go to the Mountain West Championship, beat up on somebody else, not even close. But they are undefeated. Coastal Carolina. And Coastal Carolina and Marshall could end up being paired together in a bowl game if they finish number 1 in their conferences, which I expect them to. And that would be the New Orleans Bowl. And that would be a great matchup. Coastal Carolina against Marshall. So, Coastal Carolina still undefeated. So far, they have wins against Kansas, Campbell, Arkansas State. I guess their best win would be number 21, Louisiana on the road, who beat Iowa State. And then after that, Georgia Southern, Georgia State, South Alabama, Troy. They do get App State, Texas State. And the last game of the year, another good win for them would be against Liberty. So I think Coastal Carolina could have a better resume than Marshall and Boise State. I think they will get matched up against Marshall in the New Orleans Bowl, and I think that would actually be a good bowl. Speaking of Liberty, they're still undefeated, and they just got ranked. Wins over Western Kentucky, FIU, North Alabama, UL Monroe, at Syracuse, Southern Miss. Remaining games, at Virginia Tech, at NC State, UMass, and at Coastal Carolina. They would actually have some good wins in there. 3 road wins against ACC teams, and then a road win against Coastal Carolina. I think out of the 3 teams that I have mentioned so far, Liberty would actually have the best resume. It's not going to get them into the playoffs, but it is the best resume. Now I want to talk about the Pac-12 real quick. The best chances for the Pac-12 is Oregon and USC. Now look, their regular season only 6 games, and they're not good games. Oregon has Stanford, Washington State, UCLA. I mean, UCLA might be good. Oregon State, Cal, and Washington. And then their best win would be going to the Pac-12 championship and beating USC. On the other hand, USC, they get Arizona State. They're up and coming. Arizona, Utah, Colorado, Washington State, and UCLA. So I think USC would actually have more quality wins if they were to go undefeated and beat Oregon in the Pac-12 championship. But to me, that's not enough games. I mean, a lot of chaos would have to happen. Oklahoma State, they were one of the dominoes that I said needed to fall for Cincinnati, and fall they did. But if they go on and win the rest of their games, they'll have some pretty good wins. They have a win over number 17 Iowa State. They would have a road win against Kansas State coming up and a road win against Oklahoma, and then their only loss would be a home loss to Texas. It's not a horrible loss, but it's not good. So Oklahoma State is probably the Power 5 team that's like needs the most help to get back in the picture. I think if Oklahoma State would have went undefeated, they could have filled that 4th spot quite easily. People are forgetting about Texas A&M. So far, their only loss is to Alabama. And yes, they did get blown out. They would still have good wins over number 4 Florida, and then a road win at Auburn. Tennessee fell off the map. All the rest of these not very good, but two pretty good wins. I would say that would be a little bit of a better resume than Oklahoma State, except for the fact that Oklahoma State still has a chance to win the Big 12 championship. So maybe that would be the tiebreaker. I would actually give Oklahoma State the edge in that just because they have a chance to win their conference championship. We're going to talk about Georgia. Now, their only loss was at Alabama, and they were competitive for one half, but in the second half, they just, I don't know, they didn't show back up. I don't know what happened. But if they were to win the rest of their games, they would have some pretty good wins, multiple good wins. The home win against number 7 Auburn, I know they dropped out of the rankings, but now they're back in. A home win against Tennessee, number 14 at the time. Tennessee's gone now. And then a game against Florida, number 8 right now. I think Florida will stay a little bit higher ranked. And Georgia will get their chance to beat Alabama in the SEC championship game. So if they do that, I think they're in. But if they lose to Alabama, they would need some help. Now, their only losses would be to one team, Alabama. How would it stack up to the other resumes? It's very complicated. Miami, believe it or not, Miami is still not out of it. They are 5-1. If they were to win the rest of their games, they could potentially get back to the ACC championship. And if they knocked off Clemson, they would be in. Not really any great games. We thought that road game against Louisville, because they were ranked at the time, would be a good win, but it's not looking like it now. So Miami needs to go undefeated in hopes that Notre Dame trips up and falls below them in the rankings. That's Miami's only shot right now. That's your only shot. Florida's still back in the mix. Their only loss was at Texas A&M. I called that because I saw on paper that was just not a good matchup for Florida. But if Florida were to win out, they would have a win over Georgia. That would be a great win. But they would still need to beat Alabama to get into the playoffs, because if they get to the title game and get beat by Alabama, there's just not enough meat on the bone for a 2-loss Florida to get into the playoffs. Let's get into the Power 5s that are still undefeated and are highly ranked. There's a few Power 5s that are undefeated, but they're too far down to really make an impact right now. The first one that pops in my head is Indiana. Who expected this? Indiana is number 13 in the nation. Think about that. Their first game against Penn State, they go to overtime and they beat Penn State. That immediately catapulted them into the top 25. Then they go on the road and beat a Rutgers, who beat Michigan State, who beat Michigan. So that's not a bad win this year. If Indiana wins out, they're in. Simple. But let's say they get one loss. And let's say that one loss is to Ohio State. That means they would not go to the Big Ten championship. So they would have one loss. But they would have wins over Penn State, Michigan, and Wisconsin. That's a pretty good resume. I think that would beat Texas A&M resume. I think that would beat a 2-loss Georgia resume. I think that would beat a 2-loss Florida resume. I think that would beat the 1-loss Oklahoma State resume. So Indiana's destiny, as far as the playoffs go, firmly within their grasp, even if they lose to Ohio State, because they would have a lot of good wins. So I actually have Indiana having a better chance than those if they only finish with one loss. That's a big if, because it's only 2 games into the season. But so far, they look pretty good. Now, a lot of people are giving Wisconsin a really good chance to get into the playoffs, including ESPN. I think they have them at 40%. So let's look at what their resume would look like. Let's say they go undefeated through the season and lose to Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. All right, so what do they have here? They would have a road win against Michigan and then a home win against Indiana. So if you think about it, that Indiana versus Wisconsin matchup could actually decide which one of those two could get into the playoffs. Notre Dame, they're still undefeated, and they do get a crack at Clemson this week. A Clemson that does not have Trevor Lawrence. So if they were to beat Clemson, go undefeated the rest of the way, and then lose to Clemson in the ACC championship game, because I'm assuming Clemson would have Lawrence back, I still think Notre Dame would get in simply because they would have that win over Clemson. Now, if they lose to Clemson this coming week, then they better hope and pray that they finish the season ranked above Miami. Because if not, they're not getting another shot against Clemson, and I think that eliminates them from the playoffs. If Miami gets another shot and they beat Clemson, then they would get in. Really two interesting teams I saved for last. The first one, BYU. They are 7-0. They are the only team that's 7-0 along with Clemson. Now, if they finish the season undefeated, they would actually have one decent win at Boise State. No conference championship, so they couldn't be a conference champion. I think BYU does not have a better chance than Cincinnati, like ESPN says. Let's look at Cincinnati, assuming they go undefeated. They would have a good win over Army, who is ranked number 22, and I think Army will get ranked again. They would have a good road win against SMU, ranked number 16. SMU still ranked, and they have a win over Memphis and UCF. And going to the AAC championship game, they would have to beat one of those good teams again, probably SMU. That would give them another quality win. And that's why I would put Cincinnati ahead of BYU. Number one, they're ranked ahead of BYU. And number two, their resume just looks way better than BYU's. The most plausible scenario is Notre Dame beat Clemson at home, finish the season undefeated. Clemson gets Trevor Lawrence back and beats Notre Dame. And I think that puts Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, and Notre Dame into the playoffs. That's the one that I would see. Notre Dame beats Clemson without Lawrence, gets to the ACC championship. Clemson gets there with Lawrence and then beats Notre Dame again. And then there you go. Problem solved. Cincinnati still needs a few more dominoes to fall for them to get into the playoffs. And one of them is either Notre Dame or Clemson beating the other team twice. That has to happen for Cincinnati to get in. Oklahoma State lost. That was one domino. That's the big domino. That's all I got for you for this video. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you on my next video.